Greetings. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan. On this edition, we're honored to be joined by actress, singer, comedian, all-around entertainer, Miss Pryor. Welcome to Cultural Caravan.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. You know, basically, we're very excited about your work and certainly the fact that you have an exciting new show that explores a lot of topics, particularly your personal background, as well as just the experience of being a woman in the world. Right. Chicken and Latkes.
Right.
Okay, tell the audience, what is this wonderful show about?
So Fried Chicken and Latkes is a look at my life growing up Black and Jewish, but has relevance to what is going on in today's culture racially. So it kind of, I think the show kind of reflects, although it takes place in the very stereotypical and politically incorrect era of the late 70s, 80s, and 90s up until my dad passed away. But I think it's a mirror reflection of exactly what really is going on in today's culture racially.
Now, for those who don't know or just came from another planet,
right? Yes,
you are the daughter of
Mars,
the great, great Richard Pryor.
Yes,
and and basically just thinking about the title.
Yes,
Fried Chicken and Latkes. That tells us a lot. Tell us
look, Dad's an African-American man. Mom was a Jewish woman who thought she was a Black militant. So, kind of Fried Chicken and Latkes made sense. It was a great marriage of food, just not people. And, but they came up with me, so that was pretty awesome. And yeah.
How was it when you think about growing up in a home with these two talented but interesting individuals?
Yes.
Let's start with Richard Pryor.
Yes.
What was your impressions?
Dad, what a lot of people don't know is my dad was really a strict dad. I mean, for all his foibles and things that were going on in his life, he was very like, you will not behave this way. And so we were brought up with a lot of rules and a lot of etiquette, and had to have manners and had to make our beds and clean. And we also had to have jobs. So we have work ethic because, he made it so. And yeah, were there times that he spoiled us? Yes. Were there times that he was not present because of, everyone knows, if you don't know and you're from Mars, Dad did a lot of drugs. And so, there were times he wasn't present, but he was still our dad, when it comes down to it.
Wow. And
a genius.
Yes, he was.
On top of that, comedically, it's incredible.
Now, this actually is the 10th anniversary of his passing. He passed in 2005.
Yes, ma'am.
Of multiple sclerosis, if I say it correctly. Tell us about that journey in terms of dealing with Dad's challenges towards the latter part of his life.
When you have a parent, I think, and I'll say it in a broader sense, when you have a parent who suffers from a central nervous system disease, that doesn't have control of their functions or the way that they used to be, I think for any child or any caregiver, it's challenging, and for us it was challenging because it's like you can have feelings about the man that was, but then there's the man that is, and whatever that disability is. And then you learn how to kind of live from that place and how to communicate with them from that space. And it changes the dynamic, and it also, if you're willing, it allows you to work through a lot of maybe stuff that you didn't get to work through before. And I felt at least very lucky that I got to do that with him, and process a lot that I was able to kind of live afterwards. But when a parent passes, and someone who's as big as he passes, it's not just your impact, you realize it has impacted everyone else, and you're sharing him with the world. So that's another dynamic.
Now, I know that you grew up in Hollywood, and
Hollyweird, I like
Hollyweird.
to call it. Yeah.
Okay,
Hollyweird,
yes.
I like to call it.
And just dealing with a famous parent, being a normal child, just trying to adapt. How was it being the daughter of Richard Pryor back as you were growing up?
I think being the daughter of Richard Pryor growing up, I mean, it was the 70s. He was at the height of his career, and going into the 80s. So for me, I think it was more like a fantasy world. It's like you're getting to take limos to school, you know. Dad's showing up and everyone's like, oh, Richard Pryor's here. And you're like, yeah, that's my dad's Richard Pryor. You know, I think it's later when you grow up, you're like, oh, God, you know, Dad, you have to come to the party. You know, it's my party. You know, it's that kind of thing.
Yes. Yeah. And I can imagine. And also dealing with the paparazzi, dealing with the tabloids.
Right.
That, I'm sure,
you know,
I
think what's funny is I think it's a lot less challenging today. I think it's a lot more challenging today than it was back then because of the internet and their phones, you know what I mean? So everything travels like this.
Exactly.
Back then it was like, you know, he kind of told it himself on stage. So that was like the beauty of it.
Yes.
But one of the things after he passed that I did is I moved out of Los Angeles to Baltimore, Maryland because I didn't want to deal with the paparazzi. I didn't want people tapping my phones anymore and being outside my windows and taking pictures and people who knew the people who knew the people, you know what I mean? It's like after a while it just gets too much. And you know, and I talk about it in my solo show, the fact that I wanted this life. I wanted to be able to live a life and have a life. And I don't think I would have had that had I made the choice to stay in Hollywood.
In terms of that,
Yes.
in terms of you actually took off and really started doing your own work as a
Yes,
teen.
ma'am.
Head of the Class was one of your first intros.
Yes.
Tell us about that.
You know, it was, I'll tell you, Head of the Class came up, that was a shock. It's the first thing I've ever done. It was the first thing I ever professionally auditioned for. And before that, so what happened was I auditioned for a play in Los Angeles, and this woman who was a casting director for TV said, you really should be auditioning for TV. Do you have an agent? I said no. She brought me to an agent. He said, I'm going to send you out on an open call for the show, Head of the Class. I was like, all right. You know, and they said, do a monologue. So I wrote a monologue. And I wrote 3 characters. And I went in and I did it. And the producer said, do you have someone who's a teenager? And I said, sure, and I didn't. So I went home, read the newspaper, literally found this whole thing on these girls that were in gangs. So I made this rap. It's like one rap and was really cool, by the way. Made a rap, went in, did the rap, and they said, we want to use that character on the show with you doing it.
Wow.
So that's how it happened.
That
doesn't happen, by the way.
Absolutely. Now, how did your father react to this?
He was happy because he knew. I mean, look, I'm the one who got the Afro wig, and the Mr. Microphone, and my sister got, the education. So they knew I was going to be the performer in the family.
Wow.
They're like, if anyone's going to make it, this one right here, that's going to be the one.
Wow.
Yeah.
And how did your other siblings react to your in the limelight?
You know what? They're fine with it. Look, we all encourage each other. My sister's a professor. My brother's a performer. My brother Richard Pryor Jr. is a performer. My baby brother Mason. My other siblings, who I feel like they're normal, like my sister. They have normal lives. So,
so basically, everyone has basically made a name for themselves in a way. They're
absolutely
moving on with their life.
I would say we're the most tenacious, independent people with the Pryor name.
If there was anything that you want people to take away of what your father described, who your father really was, beyond the glitz and everything else, what would you say? He
was a man of truth. And I think he really, if you look at it in terms of our history as just Black people, that the power of the oral story, the oral history is something that he did so well, and he made us laugh, and he made us cry, and he made us see those people, and it was all truth. And he didn't have to. It's funny. It's like in today's world, I wonder, would my dad be urban enough? You know what I mean? Because his story was so much more universal, and also too, when he spoke about the Black experience, he was talking about actual experiences on the stage that were actually happening at the time. And you don't have very many comics who actually today are living that life to be able to describe the climate of what's going on. Do you know what I mean? Correct. We don't have a lot of people who have a personal experience with our Trayvon Martins, with our Freddie Grays. You know what I mean? And Dad had those experiences to share at that time because he grew up in such a tenuous racial climate. if that makes sense.
Definitely. You know, he was a trailblazer. When you
Yes,
think
ma'am.
about all of the comics that, you know, your father, I remember going to the theaters and looking at all of his films, okay, and just being amazed because he had so many. I mean, before there was Eddie Murphy,
Right.
before there was so many, he laid the groundwork, and he was actually respected, I believe, by many comics.
Yes, ma'am.
At a time in his life, I know he stopped using the N-word.
Yes.
And
Yes.
that's one thing they did not remember. But
Right.
tell us about that.
Well, you know, I think for him it was profound. You go to Africa, you see your likeness on money, you see your likeness everywhere, and you realize the things that were post-slavery don't exist for you when you're there.
Yes.
Do you know what I mean? Although it does. I mean, since, you know, colonization over in Africa, I mean, we have all sorts of problems, but, you know, it's not like it is.
Exactly.
It's not like it is here, you know, which is interesting when you have this whole debate too going on about Harriet Tubman being on a $20 bill.
Yes.
You know, because I think it's important for us, and especially for women of color, to be able to see themselves. And so my dad felt that seeing himself reflected on something of value diminished the American word for what is supposed to be lazy and subservient. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And it no longer played a role, unless you're in our family and it's actually terms of endearment. So
Tell us, for those who are really excited now about what it was the experience about the show, tell us about the show.
Well, okay, so the experience of it. So Fried Chicken and Latkes, like I said, it's about growing up being Black and Jewish, and it's kind of a mirror reflection on what was going on in that time. But as we go through the show, we see it's really also a reflection of what's happening right now in our history. You know, we thought it was going to change because we had a Black man for president, and really we've gone backwards instead of forwards. And the show is also about, it's not just I grew up Black and Jewish, as it is I found who Rain was through this process. I found who I was after my dad passed away. I realized I no longer had to live in the shadow. He was now a part of my shadow. Does that make sense? And not meaning that he's guiding me. He's one of our ancestors now, so he's part of what's pushing me along into my purpose. And so that's kind of where the journey and the different levels of the show, and there's music in it, there's comedy in it, there's drama in it. I play 11 different characters.
Wow.
I think now I play 12 different. I think we just added one the other day, so I think now there's 12 different characters.
Wow,
And
that is
yeah.
phenomenal. And I know you also play your dad at some point too.
I do
Whoa,
play my
that
dad.
must be something.
Yeah.
I went down in the house because they got magnums too. And they don't just kill cars, they kill niggas.
How did your family react to the show?
You know what? They've always loved it. They always like it. I think what's neat is to hear my brothers and sisters go, "Oh yeah, that was like," you know, the older ones like, "Oh, it was like that," you know, and they liked it. I mean, no one's ever complained other than, you know, my mom saying I don't really sound like that, and I'm like, no, but you really do. Or, you know, I mean, that's really it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When you think about, again, and just let's talk about the reaction of people to
Yes.
seeing the show
Yes.
with you in it and what you said. What are some of the reactions you've gotten?
The reaction I've gotten is, if the person is of mixed heritage, it's been, thank you so much for sharing our story.
You got some Caucasian in you, but some Black. No, some woo 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 woo. Oh, you were Jewish soul sister. Well, how about that?
And that's the best thing you get, because I didn't want, first of all, I didn't want the show to be mea culpa. I didn't want it to be, even though it's about me, I didn't want it to be the Rain Pryor, if that makes sense, unlike my book when we were talking.
Yes.
So I didn't want it to be jokes my father never taught me, but I wanted to have elements of who I was, because that's what it is. But when someone can walk away and say, hey, I saw myself, thank you for sharing our story, and then when other people say, you made me think about who I am. You made me think, have I said those things? Have I done those things? Maybe not even consciously, you know, and been unaware. You're now making me kind of aware, and that makes me feel good.
Wow.
You know?
Now my bubby, which is my grandmother on my maternal side, the first time she ever saw me, she took one look at me and said, "My, she's black as a berry, black as a berry."
Now, in terms of the fact that this show has actually, the version of the show has actually been brought in. You have Camilla Forbes, who is a director, you know, a fabulous director.
I'll have a set. Can I just tell you?
Yes, tell us.
Yeah, I mean, like, first of all, I started off the show in such bare bones, like, you know, because it was simple. You can self-produce that way. You know what I mean? It's 2 black boxes wherever you go. Maybe it's a chair, maybe it's not. Maybe they match, maybe they don't. You don't care. You have your band. It's set up a certain way. There's no frills, you know. And now I have someone whose eye that I trust, because she's also the first director that didn't want to make it the Richard Pryor story, that kept to the truth of what I was trying to do. And her nuances and her insight is just so, it's changed it that, you know, and to separate yourself as writer and performer has been an interesting experience. And she's made that very pleasant, because I've had to do a lot of work contextually for the piece, because she's such a great dramaturg and she has such an eye for little things that nobody ever could have noticed, that she said, oh, we need this, let's answer this because I thought about this here before, so let's go back and answer. And I was just like, you know, and I remember sometimes I'm like, no, and then I'm like, oh, you're right. You know?
Exactly. So that's great. And you have a director you can trust and really works with you.
And she's brilliant, you know. I mean, she's done great work. This isn't like a novice, you know, director.
And so right now, the show that you have now, it's music. People will also discover your wonderful musical abilities, that in terms of being a comedian, a music, and so forth. And so much, I'm sure it takes a lot after you do.
Yes, and what's funny is people always ask that. It takes me an hour and a half after the show to wind down, and then I'm literally down. Like I'm ready to go to bed. Put me in the bed, let me sleep. You know, and this is grueling. There's 6 shows a week. So yeah.
So for those out there who are considering, they're going to get what? What are they going to find out about the show? What is it going to, you know, really? What do you see? What do you want people to come away with this show?
That is, although we've come a long way, we still have some ways to go. We still have some work to do. And the only way to do it is to really look at who we are, to look at our individual corruption and our spiritual corruption in order to change the world that we are living in that's going backwards.
Exactly. Now, you're also a wife, a mother.
Yes.
Tell us how you balance that.
I'm not a wife now. I was a wife. I'm a divorced woman, but I get along great with my ex. And I talk about that in the show as well. But as a family is very important to us. And it's also important to what is also the foundation of my spiritual belief, which is Ifa. So which is based in African tradition. So to have cohesion for your children and to honor each other, although it doesn't mean we always get along, it doesn't always mean we say nice things to one another. What it means is that the broader picture is about her and her well-being, and to raise her up so that she can feel powerful. And I think it's my responsibility as a parent that everything I do is about benefiting her. So having her, one, took my ego out of it. Because once you have a kid, it's like, you don't even exist, so it doesn't matter. And that's like the beauty, I think, of having, if you can be that kind of aware parent, it's the best thing that can happen, I think, to a human being, is that you're now responsible for everything of that child, and you're also responsible of how you let them go. As well, at all the different stages of their ages. You know, Lotus is 7, and so to watch her now, like all of a sudden she liked boys. It came like this, but she doesn't even know what those feelings are. She just, I'm watching her change her clothes 4 times because 2 little boys are outside. I'm like, what are you doing? You know what I mean? And I realized, oh my God, she has a crush, and she doesn't even know what she's doing. You know what I mean? I'm like, that's so interesting. It's like the peacock with the feathers.
Yeah,
you know?
Exactly. Now, for those in the audience who may be considering a career in the arts.
Get out. No, I'm joking.
What suggestions do you have for those out there who are interested in it?
When I was teaching theater and when I was teaching acting in Baltimore, I had my own acting classes that I was teaching. One of the things I said is you have to if you want to be an artist creatively in whether it's music, whether it's dance, whether it's theater, television, you have to be honest with yourself. And you have to ask yourself, and I mean blunt honest, am I good enough? And where do I need to train to become good enough? And you know, it's like, because I always find it like, we laugh at the people on American Idol who can't sing, but I also feel sorry for them, because I'm like, where are the people who say to them, no? And how come they don't hear it? You know what I mean?
Exactly.
And I think to be an artist, you have to be self-evolved and let go of that ego that makes you caught in your self-delusion. And that's the biggest thing I think as an artist. A fellow artist, I could say to another artist, is one, is this something you really want? Do you have what it takes? Not just, I believe. Do you have what it takes? And are you willing to see it through?
Well, I just want to, on that note, say, on behalf of Cultural Caravan, we want to sincerely thank you for particularly carrying not just your family's legacy, and I'm talking about your dad and your mom, but also really sharing your experiences being a human being, a woman in this world, and actually the truth in the spirit of your father. So I want to say thank you so much for what you do, and I encourage the audience to really check out this wonderful play and celebration of life, Fried Chicken in Latkes with Rain Pryor. On behalf of Cultural Caravan, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me.
Well, I hope you've enjoyed this broadcast, and we continue to encourage you to tune in, to write, and to tell a friend. And please visit our website at www.ccptv.org. But until next time, Louise Dente saying thank you. My name is Louise Dente, and I welcome you to yet another edition of Cultural Caravan.
I realized that to learn about the people, you study the dance. And when you study the dance, you learn the history of the people. Because dance in traditional African cultures used to preserve, and so that the young coming forth learn by age group. And as I said, you know, I'm skipping years. In traditional African cultures, you learn by age group. So you would have the toddlers who will be going around, they aren't paying any attention, but they are, because these rhythms are becoming a part. And then as they go into the initiation rites, everything is explained. Then after the initiation, then they are ready for courtship and marriage, and then maybe baby naming ceremonies, and on and up until they make the transition to the grand ancestral grounds.
They jumping in the city, West Indian happy, happy whole time.